Mike McDaniel expects at some point Tua Tagovailoa will return. Is that good for Miami's present? And is it good for their future? We'll answer that question today on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Man, what's up? What's up? Welcome to the new Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with the help of our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I'm the host, the barber, Tony Wiggins, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Kevin Oestreicher on today's episode and show. Here's what we're going to do, man. We're going to run it down. Talk about the Falcons and their balance. They had a big-time passing game, and then all of a sudden the other day, they won running the ball. Could that be good for them and Kirk Cousins? The best two loss teams in the AFC, or the two that are best positioned to make the playoffs without winning their division. We'll discuss that. And then we'll get to Tua, expected to be back in 24 by their head coach. Kyle Krabs has some very interesting things to say about that. Of course, we're going to be interested all day because we appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day and for being an everyday here on Locked On NFL, which is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to tune in again on Locked On NFL tomorrow morning, where the madman Tyler Rowland will bring you more NFL coverage. Today's episode is sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Kevin Oestreicher, you cover a team that ain't got no quarterback problems. That boy might win the MVP again, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's right. But the Miami Dolphins, I did a show earlier here on Locked On NFL where I really got upset because I'm like, they didn't have a plan for a backup. And that doesn't mean competition for a dude that you gave a couple $100 million to, but what it means you have to have a competent backup quarterback, somebody that's played, and they can't even run their offense, and then they pick a quarterback up off the scrap heap. That's wild for a team with playoff aspirations.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, the thing with the quarterback situation these days, Wig, is if you don't have one of the top elite guys, even if it's a guy who's in the middle of the pack, you have to pay that guy, because if you don't, they're going to go somewhere else and you kind of have to start from ground zero. But in that situation, it's like, well, is this guy really worth the money? And then obviously on top of that, if a guy has injury concerns, doesn't matter. You got to pay him anyway. So again, if you don't have Mahomes, Lamar, or Allen, Burrow, any of those top guys, you're kind of like, don't want to pay the money, but you have to pay the money. And that can leave teams in bad spots.
You're right. And the thing is and I'm not criticizing those kids that they have down there. But it's like, if you're the Miami Dolphins and your quarterback has a history of injuries, one, you paid him knowing that, right? Two, you paid him knowing that, and then you hinged and attached the entire functionability of your offense with that. And I called it quarterback. What did I call it? It wasn't just a malfunction. I called it whatever that word is when you do some malpractice. That's the word. See, the barbershop, we don't have to remember words like everybody else, but I'm just telling you, that's what it is. To me, it was quarterback malpractice, and I think it's sabotaged this season. You got fantasy football owners wanting to get rid of Tyreek Hill for a bag of peanuts because they don't think they can get him the ball and all of that stuff. That just means that they didn't do their due diligence and at least get a Jameis Winston type or Joe Flacco or somebody in there where they could be competent. Listen to what Kyle Krabs talks about when he talks about Tua coming back and what the Miami Dolphins' responsibility is going forward.
Now, what the Dolphins ultimately end up doing with Tua and the coaching staff and the front office, I know that we're in evaluation period for all that stuff. Like that, there's so much that can change, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing the next 12 weeks play out to get the clarity that we need for where this organization ultimately goes from here. But one thing that I do believe is you can't put yourself in this position again. And the benefit to the doubt, and I know that they've worked really hard to build the confidence of Tua Tagovailoa as a passer. And I understand why the Dolphins really didn't do that when the first couple of years of Brian Flores, all he did was dump on the guy and you had to rebuild his confidence, and investing in quarterback to a certain degree is probably counterproductive. It makes sense. I understand why the team's process was the way that it was, but all of that's out the window now. At least it is for me and my perspective of how you have to handle the quarterback situation. So whether Tua is here for 2025 and presumably 2026, because if he's here for 2025, then his 2026 salary guarantees, or if the team goes in a different direction and accepts sunk cost to sunk cost and makes whatever decisions that they need to make at the quarterback position and elsewhere for the operations of the football team based on the parties that were involved in making that decision that ultimately blew up in your face in a game and a half. However it ends up, you have to have someone else you have confidence in to start.
Makes common sense to me. What do you think about it, KO?
Yeah, I feel Kyle mentioned that key phrase to me, Wig, that sunken cost. It feels
don't you know when you hear that, that's bad news, right?
For any team, man. I mean, multiple teams this year, Wig, we've seen it all across the board where these teams get stubborn with this stuff. And we've seen that with quarterbacks, with coaches. And my whole thing is, look, you paid the money. And whether, some mistakes are worse than others, right? Obviously, with Tua, first of all, his health has to be looked out for first and foremost.
Absolutely.
So obviously, going to see specialists and figuring out what's best for him. The Dolphins expect him back in 2024. You have to make sure he's 100% ready to step on that football field from a health perspective. But when you talk about the football play, this is a guy that the Dolphins need, man. They need him because Tyler Huntley, and I watched plenty of Tyler Huntley in Baltimore when he was there. He is not the answer for this team. They've tried some other guys as well. But for the long-term future, is Tua that Super Bowl winning quarterback that can take Miami to where they want to go? He has the arm, but sometimes the arm wavers on him. And you need a guy that can maximize Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. He's the guy on the roster to do it right now. But if you're sitting there with a draft pick and there's a golden opportunity to take a young guy, if I'm Miami with the uncertainty, I'm not passing that up.
And that's exactly where Kyle was going. I recommend anyone go to Locked On Dolphins and listen to that entire conversation because I just took some clips out of it and excerpts out of it. It is a very, very good conversation that he has. I listened to that entire first segment. And I wanted to actually take all of it and bring it here, but we don't move like that here on Locked On NFL. I tell you what, somebody's moving back into their old home for a day, and that's Sean Payton going down to New Orleans. But for some reason, I think even though the Saints didn't play well this past weekend and the defense gave up, it seems like 197 points in a game, they're not going to have that problem this week. And the confidence that some people have in Bronco land about Bo Nix is wavering a little bit. And the guys that Locked On Broncos said, nah, man, y'all chill out with that. Listen to this.
And they did. And but people, Cody, they want to post the box score for Bo Nix when he's 4 of 14, but you don't want to post the box score when he finishes 19 of 33 with 2 touchdowns and leads the team with 61 yards rushing because nobody else could frickin' move the ball at all on the ground. And I think that it's unbelievable to me that anybody is writing this guy off 6 games into his career, 26 games into his career. If we're still having these debates and still having these conversations, hey, you can say whatever you want about my takes about Bo Nix. I don't care. Put me on Old Takes Exposed. Put me on Freezing Cold Takes. But we're seeing so much good these last 4 games in particular, where the Broncos are 3-1. They just went on a 3-game winning streak, and now you came back and had an onside kick attempt at the end of this game against the Chargers. The only reason you kicked an onside is because Marvin Mims couldn't get in from 2 yards out.
My man Sarah is fired up. I'm telling you. But I do get the sense that, you can get frustrated when teams want to give up on quarterbacks that fast. But Sean Payton going back to the Dome is going to be loud, man. The Dome is always loud. It was raucous the first half against the Bucs until the Bucs start running away from them. But this isn't necessarily a quarterback you want to be taking into a Dome, especially when a team has a defense that has something to prove, and they really want to prove it against him.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, that's going to be one of those games where, you get your popcorn ready and you sit down on the couch and you're waiting for all the drama to unfold ahead of it. But, I mean, this is, look, it's a grow-up moment for Bo Nix, I guess. Like, this is a test for him, right? He's going to encounter a lot of these over the course of his career. And I think for a lot of people, Wig, in today's NFL, you and I have talked about this. If he ends up having a bad game this week, I know that there'll be calls for, is he really the guy? Is he really the future of the franchise? And we've seen these teams just so quick to pull the plug on these experiments. And it's not fair to these young guys. I think that in the right situations, a lot of these quarterbacks can thrive. Not all of them, right? Not all of them are NFL made and NFL ready and all that stuff. But, I thought that Bo Nix showed a little bit. He has shown a little bit so far. The stat sheet might not necessarily show it every single week, but this guy is through 6 games. The NFL is 6 games into the year, and we already have teams saying, all right, next guy, come on down.
I know it, man. It's crazy.
That's not how it needs to work in this game.
It's crazy. They're doing that to me in Jacksonville right now. People saying, well, what's going on with that kid, man? I know how it goes. I think just a little bit more patience required, but I think that's also must-see TV. I'm going to watch it because the Jaguars play again at 9:30, and that means I can check out other games. That's going to be one that I watch. I want to see Sean Payton back in his old stomping ground. There's a couple of 2-loss teams in the AFC that are quietly making noise and quietly getting better. They don't necessarily play a sexy brand of football, but the Chargers and the Steelers, let me tell you something. They can be a nightmare and a headache for somebody in the first and second round of the playoffs. We're going to talk about them as soon as we return here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. That's right, America's #1 sports book. FanDuel is the absolute truth, man. It's a good way for you to have some fun while you're watching the game, even if your team is not winning like the one that I covered. But you can get started with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Hey, man, when you make your wagers, right, you don't have to change pages in order to go check stats or view live play-by-play. You can do it right there on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's guaranteed. No matter if you win or not, $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. And that is at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's show is also sponsored and brought to you by Prize Picks. That's right, man. Prize Picks is where you can have a good time, man. And it's you and 10 million people, but you're not playing against 10 million people. You're only playing against Prize Picks and their projections. That's just one-on-one. If they project a person or a player is going to have certain stats, all you got to do is go more than or less than. And guess what? You get between 2 and 6, you can win some money. Get over 4, you can almost win 100 times your money at Prize Picks, man. I'm telling you, it's all about the projection. Go to prizepicks.com. Make sure you download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I'll say it again. It's Locked On NFL, LOCKEDON NFL, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app in America. You need to make sure you get on over to Prize Picks right now and enjoy yourself and have a good time. It is Locked On NFL. I am Tony Wiggins, the host and the barber at the barbershop, along with my man Kevin Ostrad. Kevin, you think I can cut your hair? Tell me, come on now. I did it for 34 years.
I'm simple, man. I go 4 on the sides, and then I get the scissors on the top. That's all I do.
To get it thinned out a little bit, right?
Yeah,
you know, I can work those shears too, man. I know. I know. You know, when I was in the military, I was like the United Nations. I was cutting everybody from everywhere, and it ended up benefiting me because I could cut anything, anytime, anywhere. I tell you who doesn't have to worry about cutting anything, and that's the Chargers. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that their coach Jim Harbaugh, he's going to have to wear a little device on his heart for a couple of weeks to make sure that he's doing all right while he's out there on the field, and we wish him a speedy recovery. We don't like to see that, man. He's been a good man for football, his entire family, so we wish him and his family the best. I tell you what, he's instilled a lot of heart in those Los Angeles Chargers. They're off to a really, really good start, and they have managed to find them some offense. Listen to what the boys over at Locked On Chargers have to say about that.
It's clear the Chargers figured some things out during the bye week offensively, and they pick up a big 23-16 victory on the road. This is David Drogemeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and Justin Herbert has finally beat the Broncos in Denver. He went over 200 yards passing for the first time this season. Kamani Vidal picks up his first touchdown on his very first touch. The Chargers were able to sustain drives in this game, 4 drives of 9+ plays, including a 20-play drive, which has not happened since 2001. The Chargers defense was very, very good for most of this game. They allowed a couple of late scores, but all in all, they were great. They were flying around. They generated 2 turnovers, which turned into 10 points for the Chargers. And after a couple of late onside kick attempts that fail, the Chargers pick up the win. And for more on this game and for more on the Chargers, please check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, they got a lot of coaches from the Baltimore tree. You could almost argue that he was probably started the Baltimore tree before. Your coach is his little brother. So there's an understanding and there's a way that they move. They got a lot of former Chargers in both the front office and on the field. A lot of Ravens. So let me ask you this. How do you feel about their prospects, even though the way that they're playing and the way that they're winning isn't very sexy?
This was definitely something I can relate to because over here in Baltimore, we call the Chargers the LA Ravens out there because they have former Ravens players, coaches are out there. And you know what? With Jim Harbaugh over there, we know the Harbaugh pipeline is real. But I've seen Chargers fans wig, saying this Greg Roman offense is ugly and they're doing Justin Herbert disservices. And that's just what the Greg Roman experience is. He orchestrated some of the best rushing offenses in Baltimore in NFL history, but the pass offense generally isn't that sexy unit. They're gonna have moments. Greg Roman in Baltimore was having receivers run into each other on the field and was putting 4 guys on the same side of the field all running routes in the same 10-yard area. This is all stuff that I am very familiar with and can relate to with the Chargers. But you know what? The Ravens still won games in the regular season. And while it didn't necessarily translate to playoff success, the Chargers are winning games in the regular season. And so obviously you get a shot to play in the postseason. Hopefully the Chargers can keep this up for their sake. But to me, a win is a win. You get the job done. And for Justin Herbert, we know the arm talent is crazy. We know he's a good quarterback. It's just in that offense. You wonder why Greg Roman brought in both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, 2 guys who we coached for years in Baltimore, is because he planned on using those guys. And while Gus is on IR, J.K. has been great there over the course of the first 5 weeks of their season. So this is what it is with this Los Angeles group.
It is what it is. But you know what? I think there's something to teaching guys how to win a certain way.
Sure.
And then getting to the playoffs, and now your play action gets to working, and everybody's see the easiest thing to do when a whole bunch of people have just come together is just to run the football and keep it simple and win as many games as you can until you can get to the point where you actually do start opening things up and you can dictate when you throw the football as opposed to having it dictated for you. I think it's a formula to success to get you into the playoffs. You ain't going to outshoot the teams that you think all the teams, if you start listening to them, the teams that you think that they can't beat in the playoffs, they ain't going to outgun them. They can outstyle them though and force those teams to play a way that they don't want to. You know what? I call it not only the Baltimore Raven way, but the Pittsburgh Steelers way, because guess what? They are also 4-2. They are the other 2-loss team that right now if the playoffs ended, both of those teams will be in. I think one would be a 4 seed and one would be a 5 seed. And I know it's a little early to do that. And the Chargers are 3-2. The Steelers are 4-2. But the Steelers are 4-2. And don't look now, but Justin Fields is starting to get a little bit of confidence. Listen to what Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers has to say about that.
Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast with your post-game reaction to the Steelers beating the Raiders 32-13 in Las Vegas. It was the most confident-looking win the Steelers had all season without a doubt. Najee Harris going off, 14 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. Justin Fields adding 2 rushing touchdowns himself. Though the Steelers didn't do too great in the air, the ground game was there and it was able to punish the Raiders as the game went on. But also the defense dominant. Though they did give up an opening touchdown drive, defense comes out and creates 3 turnovers, looks dominant throughout. TJ Watt forcing 2 fumbles, both get recovered. Dante Jackson also getting an interception, also almost got another interception. But this was the best the Steelers have looked all season long. The question is, can they start to learn things from this moving forward? Also, Justin Fields' legs, is that enough to keep away Russell Wilson's arm? We'll talk about that on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Tune in wherever you get podcasts.
All right, so this is I gotta be petty and tap into the rivalry a little bit and make you talk about Pittsburgh. I'm gonna see if you're gonna play nice now and put your little biases behind. When you come over here, you got to do that in the barbershop. We can't have you being all mean. No, but what do you think about the Steelers, their identity, and how they're playing right now?
Man, you're making me talk about the Steelers before I can talk about the Ravens with you, man. That is cruel. That is cruel. But look, Pittsburgh always finds a way somehow, some way. That Mike Tomlin magic, the over 500 record that we have talked about for years and years and years with him. But I think that people do forget sometimes, Wade, that with this quarterback competition, it was pretty much Russell Wilson was going to be the starter in week 1, and then Fields is going to be the backup. But then Wilson had the injury, and so Fields comes in, and they're winning games with them. And then Russell's just kind of like, oh, okay. I guess I'm just kind of here now. But I think Chris makes a good point. Are the legs of Justin Fields going to be enough, or do they need a little more in the pass catching department in terms of Russell Wilson's arm getting the ball to receivers? Their receiver room scares me. George Pickens is great, but obviously there are some questions in terms of his work ethic and kind of how he carries himself, both on and off the field. So there is that. And then outside of that, I mean, they literally have nobody else. It's bad how bare their wide receiver room is. The defense will be the defense, though. That's kind of what they need, though. In a year last year where Kenny Pickett and Mr. Trubisky actively lost them games, they needed just a competent quarterback that would not lose them the game. And that's why they're 4-2, because their quarterbacks are not losing them the games. They're doing just enough to squeak by here, and then they look kind of good here, and then they might look worse here, but they do enough. So Pittsburgh's a team that they'll win how they win and they'll lose how they lose. And how that is it's ugly. It's a slugfest. And they're not going to go. And
here's what I'll tell you. You named those weapons. They got another weapon. It's called Justin Fields' legs. Yeah, that's the other weapon. And that's the thing. And I ain't got to talk about a quarterback having legs because you already know that, right? So you get it. The thing is though, that's the extra part of this team that makes it juicy and sexy. And then they still got people that can get after the pass rusher when they're on defense. That makes it hard, especially late in the season. And once they start getting a little bit better, if they can find another weapon, like you said, whether it's Pat Freiermuth or another wide receiver, and receivers do have a chance to start showing up late in the season because Pittsburgh is one of those teams that always has wide receivers. So we'll see. We'll see. Definitely. I think ugly is good as long as ugly gets you into the playoffs, and then anything can happen once you get there. All right. We'll talk about some teams, man, that are upstart. One of them won in a different way. We saw Kirk Cousins throw for 500 yards last week. And then this week, the Falcons said, we just going to run the ball. That means they have good run-pass balance. And that also bodes well for them as we move down to the stretch or in the middle part of this National Football League season. We'll discuss that more as we continue here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, dog, Game Time is where you need to go. I don't care what type of ticket you need, and I don't care when the event starts. Even if it's already started, Game Time is the place for you to be. Man, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to make a concert one day because of a work schedule and travel arrangements. And guess what? When I got there, my tickets were ready because Game Time is always the best at curation and last minute tickets. Doesn't matter what it is, man. Game Time has it. Priority Game Time picks, all-in pricing, seat views, the lowest price guarantee, and Game Time ticket coverage also. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Locked On NFL, third and final segment here with my man KO on the Tuesday. Man, we getting it in. We talking about everybody except the Ravens, and I'm just kidding with him about that. That's a private joke. Make sure you check out our AFC squad get together that we have every single week. We'll post that on all of our YouTube pages. That is a lot of fun over there for us. I tell you who's having fun. Kirk Cousins is having fun doing the swag surf and all of that stuff in Atlanta. He had fun throwing for 500 yards on national TV in prime time. And then I know they were playing the Panthers. I know they were playing. It doesn't matter who they were playing. They found a way to win in a different way by using their running backs. KO, that's good when you can have run pass balance, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, if you're a defense, your dream is if an offense is one-dimensional and you can just sell out to either stop the run, you can sell out to stop the pass. With these teams that have both, it's really difficult because you don't know what's coming, and they do both effectively. As a defense, that's your nightmare right there.
Yeah, I want you to see the smile on Aaron Freeman's face when he talks about the Falcons, who are another surprise team who are winning a bunch of games.
The Falcons' run game rolled in a 38-20 win over the Panthers in Week 6. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. The Falcons broke the 2-century mark on the ground, rushing for over 200 yards, split nearly evenly between running backs Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Robinson had 2 scores, while Algier scored once to help lift the Falcons over the Panthers in their 38-20 win. And it was a little bit closer than maybe the final score would indicate until the fourth quarter, where the Falcons defense came up with another clutch interception. This one, an interception from A.J. Terrell, stopping Carolina's momentum and spearheading the Falcons' run game to finish off Carolina to get a win, their 3rd straight in the NFC South. The Falcons hope to extend this 3-game win streak to 4 in a home game next week against the Seattle Seahawks. For more coverage of the Falcons continuing to fly high, follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
They are one of those teams that when they are winning, it is so fun to watch them. And it's especially fun to watch them when they play at home. I don't know if you saw this, man, but they fans get into a lot of fights at the end of the game, too. It's like I'd rather watch it on TV. I don't know if I want to show up. But no, the Falcons are really, really doing well for their GM, who's in his 2nd year up there, Jerry Fontenot, doing a real, real good job, man. They have done an excellent job of team building, and it seems right now the Kirk Cousins experiment is paying off for them.
It is. And, they had all those weapons over there. They draft Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson, and everyone's like, you got to use them effectively. They're not using them the right way. And so Raheem Morris comes in, they bring in Kirk Cousins, and now you're seeing it, right? They add a couple of pieces on the side, like a Darnell Mooney, who's done well over there, Ray McLeod. And with all that, I love the fact that they're using all of their guys. Or even in the running game, it's not just the Bijan show where Tyler Algier is getting involved and he's having big days. And that takes some of the pressure off of Bijan and that off of his plate. So everybody's getting involved, spreading the love out there, spreading the football. And that's great because I think as the season goes on, we know this. Football is such a physical sport. And if you have that bell cow workload, it's going to wear you down. So Atlanta has all these pieces. You might as well use them and keep guys fresh, and they're doing it effectively. That's the biggest part.
Yep, and they're figuring out a way right now, early in the season, how to have enough of a balance to slow down the pass rush. Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner probably wishes he was playing. Right. Kirk Cousins is coming off that Achilles, and then he's also an older quarterback. But it's just nice to see a dude having fun like a kid, man, when he was at Pop Warner. It's still a game, and you still have to be able to enjoy it. I'll tell you what, football is also a game of injuries. The Washington Commanders have gotten off to a surprisingly good start. They lost to your Baltimore Ravens, of course, in the Battle of the Beltway on Sunday. But I don't believe in moral victories, but when a team shows themselves they didn't embarrass themselves at all. And they're young, but it's like, okay, we're going to be competitive. How did you feel about that game? Now you can talk about the Ravens. Go ahead. Right. I know you want to get it out of there. Go ahead and talk about the Ravens.
This is my, even though it's a Commanders thing.
Yeah, man, go ahead.
Talk about the Ravens. It was a good game, man. I mean, quarterback battle between Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and I can't say enough good things about Jaden Daniels, man. I mean, he already is wise beyond his years. We saw smart, savvy moves for him throughout the entire game. And him and Terry McLaurin kind of struggled early in the season to get on the same page. But those two guys over the last month or so have been really, really impressive. But, it is a game of injuries. And on the defensive side of the ball, their run defense was second to last coming into this game in terms of yards per attempts. Jonathan Allen was lost midway through the game. And Washington honestly stopped Baltimore's run game more than I thought they would. The pass defense was getting cooked. And obviously, Jonathan Allen is not just a run stuffer. As a pass rusher, he can be very effective too.
And he's also a really, really good leader off the field and in the locker room. He's like the heartbeat of that defense. Let's hear what my man David Harrison from Locked On Commanders has to say about Jonathan being out.
Turns out the Washington Commanders lost more than just their second game of the season on Sunday. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast. And while losing to the Baltimore Ravens certainly isn't what you want, what you don't want even more is losing star players. And defensive tackle Jonathan Allen suffered a torn pec on Sunday and will be lost for the rest of the season. Head coach Dan Quinn confirming that with us on Monday. And for the team, they now look to see who they have to bring up to try and replace Jonathan Allen. Johnny Newton, Fedarian Mathis are probably going to be the two that you look to most to replace those snaps. As for John Allen, who turns 30 in January, due more than $20 million against the salary cap next season, while only carrying a $6 million dead cap number. If the Washington Commanders move on from the veteran, it's not unreasonable to ask if John Allen has taken his last snaps for the Washington Commanders. For more on that and everything else Commanders related, make sure you check out the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
A part of the game you hate seeing, but it is a reality. And it was ironed out by David right there. He could have very well played his last game as a Washington Commander, but he's a good player and he's going to get a chance moving forward.
Yeah, regardless of if it's in Washington or not, but this is exactly why teams sometimes don't draft for immediate need. They draft for talent. And Johnny Newton coming out of Illinois was one of the best prospects in this class. Washington didn't have an immediate need there with John Allen, Deron Payne, and all those guys up front. But obviously, we know, Wig, as you mentioned, injuries are a part of this game. And, you know, John Allen is not young, as David outlined there. So he steps into an immediate role now. And then if he plays well enough, the Commanders might just be like, well, we could use that money in the secondary, or they could use that money on a linebacker or somewhere like that. So it's tough, especially when you see guys who have spent entire careers in a place and, you know, you're wondering if they've played their last snaps for a franchise. We know how much of an impact Allen has had in Washington over the course of his career, but Washington essentially prepared for, hey, we're not getting any younger on this D-line. Let's go draft some talented players. And now that plan might be moving in motion a little quicker than they thought it would.
A couple of teams we talked about used the draft. They didn't draft with an empty stomach. I mean, yeah, because, you know, like you go shopping at the grocery store with an empty stomach, you start eating cookies and grapes before you even get to the line, right? You got all this stuff from the deli that might go bad. But when you draft with a full stomach, or you go grocery shopping with a full stomach, you're just taking stuff and putting it in the pantry because you know you're going to need it sooner or later. Atlanta did it with their quarterback, and now Washington did it with Johnny Newman. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. What does work, though, is Locked On NFL, a double dose of NFL coverage that you get from Locked On NFL with me, the barber, and Tyler Rowland. That's right, the madman. He is early in the morning, and I am in the afternoon. Make sure you slide on over to Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you hear your podcast or listen to your podcast, and then the Locked On NFL show on YouTube. All right, my boy Kevin Oestreicher will be back with us next Tuesday, as he always is, and maybe one of these days we will talk about the Baltimore Ravens.
One day.
And maybe I'll cut his haircut live. If the Jaguars in Baltimore play, we'll do this live, and I'll cut his hair for y'all while I'm talking to him.
Yeah, all right, man. A little bet going.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, man. Kevin Oestreicher, Tony Wiggins here, Locked On NFL. Make sure you tap in and join Tyler Rowland early in the morning for the early morning version of Locked On NFL. Until then, you guys take care. We'll do the same.